Have you ever thought about how fast a normal day can turn into your worst nightmare? How one moment you could be watching your child play happily, and the next, your entire world crashes down around you. This is exactly what happened to the parents of Emily Jones, a bright and joyful 7-year-old girl whose life was cruelly taken on what should have been a pleasant Sunday afternoon at the park. Before we dive into today's heartbreaking true crime story, take a second to subscribe. If you're drawn to real stories that expose the darkest sides of humanity and demand justice for the innocent, this channel is made for you. Today, we're telling the story of Emily Jones, an innocent little girl whose life was stolen in broad daylight, in a place where she should have felt safe. Emily Grace Jones came into this world on January 18, 2013, in Bolton, England. Her parents, Mark and Sarah, welcomed their only child with open arms. Mark worked as a credit manager, while Sarah was a solicitor. Though they would later separate, they remained committed to raising Emily together, always putting her needs first. Everyone who knew Emily described her the same way. She was absolutely full of joy and laughter. Her heart was as big as her smile, which would light up any room she entered. Emily wasn't the kind of child who was content to sit still for long. She loved the great outdoors and threw herself into any sport or activity with total enthusiasm. Her dad, Mark, often called her a daredevil because she wasn't afraid of anything. She loved hiking and climbing, swimming and horseback riding. Emily approached life with a fearlessness that impressed everyone around her. But Emily wasn't just active and brave, she was smart too. Her teachers at school said she was incredibly creative, always drawing pictures and writing stories that showed imagination beyond her years. In class, she was known for finishing her work way before her classmates. She would sometimes jokingly tell her teachers, "I'm done with my work, and the other kids haven't even written the date yet." Emily was popular with her classmates too. She got along with everyone and had that special kind of personality that drew people to her. She was the kind of child who seemed destined for great things, bright, hardworking, kind, and full of potential. Sunday, March 22, 2020, was Mother's Day in the UK. Like most children that morning, Emily had given her mom a special card to celebrate. Despite being separated, Mark and Sarah had a good co-parenting relationship. They had arranged to meet that day at Queen's Park in Bolton, as was their usual Sunday routine. Around 2:15 in the afternoon, Emily and her dad were enjoying their time at the park. The sun was shining, and Emily was happily zooming around on her scooter. Mark was watching her proudly, encouraging her to go faster, enjoying seeing his daughter so happy and free. As they were playing, Emily spotted her mother, Sarah, jogging in the distance. With excitement in her voice, she turned to her dad and said, Daddy, I want to go to Mom." Mark, seeing no reason for concern on this beautiful day, told her she could go. Emily, thrilled at seeing her mom, set off on her scooter towards Sarah, calling out to her. But Sarah couldn't hear her daughter approaching because she had headphones in her ears as she jogged. What happened next would change everything forever. As Emily scooted toward her mom, Mark noticed a woman stand up from a nearby bench. The woman, who had her hood pulled up, moved toward Emily's path. Within seconds, Emily was on the ground. At first, Mark thought his daughter had simply fallen off her scooter, a normal accident that happens to kids all the time. He could hear her crying, and he thought the woman was going to help her up. Then he heard the screams. People nearby were shouting in horror, crying out that his daughter had been stabbed. The woman who had approached Emily was now walking briskly away, and Mark could see she had a knife in her hand. In that moment, Mark's world collapsed. He ran to his daughter as fast as he could. When he reached her, he saw that Emily had a catastrophic injury to her neck. His little girl was struggling to breathe, bleeding heavily from the wound. Cradling his daughter, Mark pleaded with her, his voice breaking. "Just stay with me, Emily. Stay with me. Don't leave me." Sarah was still jogging in another part of the park, completely unaware that her daughter was fighting for her life just yards away. Mark managed to call her, desperate for her to come quickly. Meanwhile, a nurse who happened to be in the park rushed over and began trying to help Emily. The little girl's condition was deteriorating rapidly before their eyes. One of the people in the park that day was a man named Tony Canny, who was there with his wife and baby daughter. When he realized what had happened, Tony made a split-second decision that would prove crucial. He began chasing after the woman who was trying to flee the scene. Tony didn't know exactly what had happened, and he wasn't sure if the woman was armed, but he knew he couldn't let her get away. As he pursued her, his wife shouted to him that the woman had a knife. Despite knowing this, Tony bravely continued his chase, putting his own safety at risk to protect others in the park. Back at the scene, Tony's wife gave Mark her baby's muslin cloth to try and stop Emily's heavy bleeding. It was a desperate attempt to save the little girl's life while they waited for emergency services. Those services arrived within minutes. The first paramedic on the scene found Emily being held from behind by her distraught father. She was bleeding heavily and had lost consciousness. Even more concerning, she was in cardiac arrest. The paramedics immediately began CPR and administered adrenaline before carefully loading her into an air ambulance. Meanwhile, Tony had caught up to the woman. Showing incredible bravery, he knocked her to the ground and sat on her to prevent her from running away. He called emergency services, telling the operator, "There's been an incident at Queen's Park in Bolton and a child's bleeding." As Tony restrained the woman, she began saying bizarre things. She claimed that she no longer needed injections, that Tony had killed her family, and that he was killing her. Recognizing that the woman was clearly not well mentally, Tony tried to calm her, saying, "You're not well. The police will help you." The woman replied, "I don't need you to tell me to be calm." Tony continued to hold her down until police arrived and took control of the situation. The woman was then taken into custody, while Emily was flown to Salford Royal Hospital. The helicopter landed at 3:27 p.m. Medical staff did everything they could. She was ventilated and given blood transfusions, but she remained in cardiac arrest. Tragically, at 3:56 p.m., all attempts to restart Emily's heart had failed. The doctors had to call her time of death. The joyful 7-year-old girl was gone, and a murder investigation was now underway. The day after Emily's death, her mother Sarah had to face the unbearable task of formally identifying her daughter's body. A post-mortem examination determined that Emily had died from an incised wound to the neck. In a heartbreaking statement released by the family, they said, "We are beyond devastated that this random act of violence means we will never get to see our beautiful little girl grow up into the wonderful young lady she was showing such promise of becoming. It is truly heartbreaking to wake up to a world without Emily in it, and we cannot comprehend why this has happened. We would like to thank the members of the public that assisted us in the park and express our gratitude to the emergency services for doing their utmost to save Emily's life." The community was in shock. Teachers at Emily's school were absolutely devastated by the news. Her headmistress paid tribute to the little girl, saying, "I want you to know how much Emily was loved. She will be missed by all her friends and all the staff. Her loss has left a hole in our hearts, and the school will never be the same again." As Emily's family began the impossible task of grieving their daughter, police needed to understand who their suspect was and why she had committed such a horrifying act. The woman they had arrested was 30-year-old Eltiona Skana. She was immediately detained under the Mental Health Act. Dr. Sanini Farrell was the on-call doctor when Eltiona was arrested. The doctor noted that Eltiona was cooperative and calm. When asked about her mental state, she simply responded, "Not very well." She claimed she couldn't remember anything about what had happened in the park, but Dr. Farrell believed this was because she didn't want to discuss it, not because she actually couldn't remember. Dr. Farrell also described Eltiona as emotionless during their interaction. When police arrested her, they found something strange, wire tied around her toes. When an officer asked what this was for, Eltiona said it was to help her with her emotions. Before it was removed, she tried to tighten the wire around her toes again. A doctor would later explain that this behavior was indicative of a psychotic action. To understand how Eltiona Skana ended up in that park on that fateful day, we need to go back and trace her history. Eltiona was born in February 1990 in Albania. According to her sister, their father had accumulated debts, and in February 2012, Eltiona was forced to marry the man her father owed money to. After the marriage, she and her new husband moved to Kuwait. She fled from Kuwait in September 2013 and eventually returned to Albania in 2014. But she didn't stay there long. She left Albania again, this time heading to Frankfurt, Germany. On August 11th, her sister paid for her to travel to the United Kingdom. She entered the UK illegally in a lorry 2 days later, on August 13th. Eltiona applied for asylum in the UK, but her application was rejected in June 2018. She appealed this decision, and the rejection was reversed. She was then given a residency permit to remain in the country until November 28, 2020, and then leave to remain until November 2024. What's shocking is that Eltiona later admitted to doctors that she had lied in her asylum application. She had falsely claimed to be a victim of sexual exploitation to improve her chances of being allowed to stay in the country. The Home Office never revealed if they were informed about this admission. By March 2015, it was clear that Eltiona's mental health was deteriorating. She was assessed by a doctor who determined that she had post-traumatic stress disorder and referred her for treatment. However, Eltiona failed to show up for her cognitive behavioral therapy session, and her case was closed. Just a few months later, in July 2015, a disturbing incident occurred. Eltiona grabbed a knife and believed she was going to be attacked. Her sister reported this, and Eltiona was sectioned, involuntarily committed, and admitted to Royal Bolton Hospital for treatment. She was diagnosed with acute schizophrenia-like psychotic symptoms. During this time, she had paranoid delusions, believing her neighbors were planning to hurt her by using her electricity. When she was granted leave from the hospital, she would often run away after refusing to take her oral medication. The medical team resorted to giving her antipsychotic medications via injection. Although she appealed against being sectioned, by August 20, 2018, doctors determined she was well enough to be released. The paranoid feelings about her neighbors trying to hurt her had lessened, as had her general feelings of persecution. After her release, mental health workers visited her 1 to 2 times a week. Eltiona frequently complained about the antipsychotic injections, saying she didn't like the side effects. In November 2015, she was taken off the medication. However, her mental health soon deteriorated again. On December 9th, she told doctors at Salford Royal Hospital that she was experiencing daily auditory hallucinations. It was noted that Eltiona's own mother didn't believe she should be on medication and disagreed with the decision to prescribe her any. In January 2017, Eltiona's condition worsened. She refused to let her care coordinator enter her property and missed a scheduled meeting. Her sister became very concerned about Eltiona's mental health, believing she was suffering a relapse. The sister arranged for a mental health team to visit Eltiona on February 13th. But before this could happen, Eltiona would commit a shocking act of violence. Her mother had come to visit her and discovered that Eltiona had been self-harming. Eltiona led her mother upstairs and then chained the door shut. She told her mother something chilling. "Once I kill you, everything will be okay." She then attacked her mother with an iron and stabbed her hand. The attack only stopped when a friend intervened. Eltiona was arrested and again detained under the Mental Health Act. During an investigation of her home, it was discovered that she had disconnected the boiler, removed all light bulbs, and gotten rid of her television, all signs of paranoid behavior. While under hospital care, Eltiona left without permission. At 5 a.m., she went to a friend's house and demanded to speak to their 13-year-old daughter. She was armed with a knife she had taken from a restaurant. The mother refused to let her inside. When the mother asked Eltiona about what she had done to her hair, she had cut it. Eltiona made a disturbing statement. She said she had cut her hair off rather than cutting off people's heads. Police returned her to the hospital, and on May 4th, she was deemed fit for release. On the morning of March 22, 2020, Mother's Day, Eltiona left her home around 1 p.m. and headed into Bolton town center. She purchased a pack of 3 crafting knives from a pound shop. She would later tell a psychiatrist that she had bought them with the intention of killing someone. After buying the knives, she went to Queen's Park. A witness later reported seeing a woman sitting on the ground with her legs crossed next to a bench. The witness said she appeared agitated and had a vacant look on her face. The witness watched her for about 4 minutes, but as she didn't say or do anything concerning, he decided to go home. Later, as Emily scooted past the bench where Eltiona was sitting with her hood pulled up, Eltiona suddenly stood up. In a swift and vicious movement, she grabbed Emily in a headlock and launched a ferocious attack, stabbing the little girl in the neck and slitting her throat. After her arrest, police searched Eltiona's flat. They found a large amount of antipsychotic medication, almost a month's worth, that hadn't been taken. A doctor would later testify that suddenly stopping this type of medication could cause someone's mental health to deteriorate rapidly within just a few days. Eltiona Skana was charged with murder and possession of a bladed article. She was remanded in custody and scheduled to appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court on May 26, 2020. As the preliminary murder hearing began at Manchester Crown Court, Judge Richard Mansell QC expressed his sympathy for Emily's family. He said to Mark, "I can't imagine the level of pain you and your wife are going through at the moment, and you have my personal and deepest sympathy, as well as the sympathy of everyone involved in the court's process." Mark attended the hearing, while Eltiona appeared via video link from Rampton Secure Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility where she was being held. During the proceedings, Eltiona entered a plea of guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Prosecutors were given 7 days to consider her plea. They ultimately decided to proceed with a murder trial. When Eltiona Skana went on trial for murder, the prosecution told the jury that they would need to decide whether this was truly a case of manslaughter or if Eltiona was using her mental health condition as what they called a convenient excuse for her actions. The court heard evidence that while in the hospital, Eltiona had spoken to a nurse in a way that suggested the attack had been planned, which would point to murder rather than manslaughter. It also emerged that from mid-December 2019 to March 11, 2020, Eltiona had not had any face-to-face contact with mental health workers. In a report read to the court, one doctor stated that Eltiona represented a very high risk of serious, potentially fatal harm to others. The court also heard a disturbing account of Eltiona's behavior in the hospital. She had been watching a children's television program when a child who resembled Emily appeared on screen. Eltiona began to laugh hysterically. She said to a nurse, "Like I said, it's been 3 months. What do you want me to do, cry all the time?" Later, she told the same nurse something even more chilling. "It was premeditated. I waited in a park and picked my victim. I did what I did, then tried to run away." It was noted that during these conversations, Eltiona was not taking her medication. The court was told that on July 30th, staff at the hospital had observed what they described as strange behavior. Eltiona had told nurses, "Your body has gone to your soul, and we're all going to die." Dr. John Crosby, a consultant psychiatrist, testified that Eltiona Skana had paranoid schizophrenia, which had caused her to suffer from delusions and lose touch with reality. He said there appeared to be no specific reason why Emily was singled out, adding that he believed Eltiona was in the midst of a psychotic episode when she took Emily's life. "It's such a terrible, rare, random attack. To my mind, I can't think of another reason why it could have occurred," he said. In a statement read to the jury, Mark expressed his confusion and grief. "I do not know why this happened. Emily was simply riding her scooter to her mom. I simply can't explain it." He described Emily as a vulnerable child, full of innocence and wonder. She was just starting off on her path of life, and her future was cut short. Our future has also been taken away. How can we enjoy life when the best part of it has been taken away? A consultant forensic psychiatrist from the hospital where Eltiona was being held gave evidence, stating that the possibility of her being convicted of murder was not realistic given her mental state. After considering all the medical evidence, the prosecution agreed it would not be fair to ask a jury to convict her of murder. The murder charge was withdrawn, and the jury was formally instructed to return a not guilty verdict on that charge. Eltiona Skana was therefore convicted of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Prosecutor Michael Brady QC explained to the court, "It is not a decision that has been taken lightly by the Crown. It's a decision taken with care and mindful of the sensitivity of the case. Having reviewed all the evidence in this case, the Crown has come to the conclusion that there is no longer any realistic prospect of conviction." Breaking news then came. A woman who killed 7-year-old Emily Jones in a park in Bolton in March had been sentenced to life in prison. Eltiona was sentenced to life with a minimum of 8 years, but she would initially be treated at Rampton High Security Hospital. If she was ever deemed well enough to leave the hospital, she would serve the rest of her sentence in prison. The judge explained that she had to be punished because she had made the decision to buy the knife. She had made the decision to kill someone, and there was an element of culpability in her actions despite her mental illness. In his sentencing remarks, the judge said, "The devastating effects of what you did will live with Emily's parents and doubtless others who knew Emily forever. It is obvious that nothing I can do or say can restore Emily to her family or offer any real comfort to them in their immense loss." He stated that he was satisfied, based on the evidence, that Eltiona had paranoid schizophrenia, and the nature and degree of her condition warranted her detention in hospital. The judge emphasized that Eltiona would only be eligible for release after serving her minimum term and being assessed as no longer a danger to the public. He added, "If you are never deemed fit for release, you will remain in hospital or prison for the remainder of your days." Later, it was reported that her minimum term had been increased from 8 years to 10 years and 8 months. The judge explained that the original sentence had been calculated in error and took full responsibility for the mistake. After the sentence was increased, Mark expressed his ongoing anguish. "I will keep fighting tooth and nail for her to stay there for the rest of her life. Whether it's 10 years or 20, it won't be enough for me. As far as I'm concerned, she's a danger to the public for the rest of her life. She'd do it again to any child. I would bet my bottom dollar on that." At the inquest into Emily's death, acting senior coroner Alan Walsh said, "In my 20 years as a coroner, this is one of the most tragic deaths that I have dealt with. The loss of a beautiful, innocent, lively, intelligent, and lovely 7-year-old in these circumstances is an unimaginable tragedy." The coroner stated that Mark, as Emily's father, was entitled to feel that Eltiona should never have been allowed into the country, given her history. During the inquest, it was reported, despite Skana being well known to mental health services, the coroner today said that the local community teams could not have predicted or prevented Emily's death. He added, though, that if nothing changes nationally, there is a risk to future lives. Mark expressed his frustration with the mental health system. "The whole profession of psychiatry needs to come under the spotlight at some point. I think it's a real worry. It's just shocking. So we're just going to try and do our best, and in Emily's name, her death doesn't go in vain. We'll just keep plugging away, trying to promote mental health awareness and the dangers of relapse and not monitoring mental health." He added, "I've met with other families in the Greater Manchester area that have been affected by homicides and lack of funding in mental health. Everybody knows this. In light of Emily's killing and the issues surrounding Eltiona's care in the community, Bolton coroner Timothy Brennan announced he would be writing a Regulation 28 Prevention of Future Deaths report to the Secretary of State. He said, "It will make clear my profound concerns about morale, workload, training, staff shortages, and inability to deliver continuity of care." The coroner described the case as showing a sector of healthcare provision that is challenging and riven with operational stress and tension. He added, "I sense a healthcare sector in crisis." However, he did not believe that Eltiona's behavior could have been predicted by her mental health team. Emily's father disagreed with this assessment. He believed those tasked with monitoring Eltiona had failed to recognize just how dangerous she really was. "It's just shocking," Mark said. "It's been a real, distressing part of everything, listening to these so-called experts that just completely different opinions, and no one really understood, as far as I'm concerned, the threat that the perpetrator posed." The coroner, Timothy Brennan, stated that Eltiona had been deliberately hiding her deteriorating condition, which meant that mental health workers didn't know she wasn't taking her medication or that she was relapsing. He added that only with hindsight could Eltiona's actions have been predicted. During the inquest, we heard from Eltiona Skana's sister, who revealed that Eltiona had been very unwell in the days and weeks leading up to the attack on Emily. According to her sister, Eltiona had been complaining of hearing voices in her head. Her sister told the inquest that there had been previous incidents of violence where Eltiona had tried to attack her and their mother. There had also been times when Eltiona had been found outside with a knife, screaming. She had displayed other concerning behaviors, such as cutting pipes to a boiler. Her sister, Clore, said living with Eltiona was like living in a horror movie. She disagreed with evidence given by Eltiona's consultant psychiatrist, who had told the inquest that Eltiona was stable and hadn't shown any relapse symptoms of florid psychotic behavior in the weeks and months before the attack. Emily's father, Mark, said that although he was glad the inquest was over, he disagreed with its findings. "I cannot believe he has come to that conclusion," Mark said. "He said they didn't realize the threat she posed, but it was their job to know. They may be underfunded and rushed off their feet, but they are dealing with dangerous people. I don't think enough money goes into mental health services, but that's no excuse, especially when you're dealing with dangerous individuals. I don't feel like I have got closure," he added. "I want to change the system. It's my daughter, and it's down to me to make this right." Following the inquest, Mark's lawyer made a damning statement. She twice told doctors that she had lied in her asylum application. She twice told doctors and police that she wanted to go home in 2015 and 2017, and the Home Office offered no explanation as to why they ignored these important clues in her presentation. A Home Office spokesperson responded, "We are carefully considering the findings from the inquest and any further recommendations by the coroner." Mark made it clear that he had not forgiven Eltiona for what she did. "I know people say it's good for your mental health to forgive, but in this instance, I'm afraid I can't. How dare she touch my daughter? How dare she put her hands on her? So no, I can't forgive her." Eltiona Skana later appealed her sentence, but this appeal was rejected. Lady Justice Maker stated that there was sufficient evidence to find that Eltiona knew what she did was wrong, as demonstrated by her attempts to escape from the scene and avoid detention. Mark expressed relief rather than happiness that the appeal was rejected. "She's a manipulative and dangerous individual, and all three judges saw that today," he said. Eltiona Skana remains at Rampton Hospital, where she continues to receive treatment. Greater Manchester Mental Health NHS, which had been responsible for Eltiona's care, conducted a review of the case. In a statement, they said, "We treat incidents of this kind with the utmost seriousness and completed an internal rigorous review. Whilst this identified learning for our services, the review found there were no markers of deterioration in Ms. Skana's mental state or behavior which would have foreseen this tragic event." NHS England, however, disagreed with the Trust's conclusion. They stated that it was clear Eltiona was unwell and posed a risk to others as early as 2017. Their report stated, "Our most important finding is that the Trust's understanding of risk concepts was poor." Mark demanded an apology from the Trust. "It's absolute nonsense," he said. "They're just trying to relinquish all responsibility. She was their responsibility. They knew she didn't comply with oral medication, but they allowed her to take it on her own volition. That is a ridiculous thing to do. She was a ticking time bomb." He added, "I want the horrible story of what happened to my daughter to be told. It's not that I want people to feel sorry for us, but it needs to be told because it's an absolute public outrage." Following Emily's death, her school announced plans for a memorial in her honor. More than £1,000 was raised for this purpose. The head teacher said she was overwhelmed by the support the school had received from the community. Emily's school friends helped design a garden in her memory, a space that would reflect Emily's love of the outdoors and provide a place for people to remember her. Mark teamed up with the charity 100 Families, which supports relatives of those killed by someone suffering from mental illness. Their goal was to change the way mental health patients are managed within the community. "Someone said to me, 'What are you trying to achieve from all this?' It's not going to bring Emily back," Mark shared. "It's not, but I don't want another family to have to go through what we have been through. I don't want Emily's death to have been in vain." In another tribute to Emily, her mother, Sarah, launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for Bolton Lads and Girls Club. The aim was to help children have support and access to various opportunities. The campaign raised nearly £3,000, a beautiful way to honor Emily's memory. For Emily's devastated family and all those who knew her, life will never be the same. Emily was a bright, kind little girl with her entire life ahead of her, a life that would have undoubtedly been filled with joy, love, and immense promise. What should have been a Sunday filled with happiness and celebration, Mother's Day, instead became the darkest day imaginable. Emily's life was taken in the most appalling circumstances, and the aftermath has been devastating for everyone who loved her. As Mark and Sarah so poignantly expressed, Emily was the beat in our hearts, the spring in our step, and the reason we got up every morning. The story of Emily Jones is not just about a horrific crime. It's about a system that failed, a mental health system lacking resources and proper protocols, an immigration system that missed red flags, and ultimately, a 7-year-old girl who paid the ultimate price. It's about a father's determination to ensure his daughter's death was not in vain, fighting tirelessly for changes that might prevent another family from experiencing such unimaginable heartbreak. And most of all, it's about remembering Emily, not for how she died, but for how she lived, full of joy, laughter, and boundless potential. In parks across Bolton, children continue to play, unaware of the tragedy that unfolded there that day. Parents hold their children a little tighter, knowing how quickly everything can change. And in a garden at Emily's school, flowers bloom in memory of a little girl who will never get the chance to grow up. This is the story of Emily Jones, a story that should never have had to be told, but one that needs to be heard.